Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to let everybody get settled in here, and then we'll get started in about 2 minutes. So thanks to everybody for taking the time out today. I appreciate you being here with us. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. All right, everybody, we're going to get started in about another minute and a half here. We've got people still jumping on board, so we'll give them just a few more minutes, and then a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then we'll dive right into training. All right, got about another minute and we'll get started. We've still got some people jumping on. So thanks everybody for being here today. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we still have a few people jumping on. Let's go ahead and get started on things. So, all right. Well, good afternoon. I'm Becky Andersen. It's so nice to have you with me. I really appreciate the fact that you have the time, or that you've taken the time. I know it's a precious commodity right now. So join me, and I'm hoping that I can share a few nuggets of wisdom with you that will give you a heads up as to what to keep an eye out for. So I own a small consulting firm, EHS consulting firm. It's called Hazardous Materials Consulting, and it's located in Des Moines, Iowa, or the Des Moines metro area. I've been consulting for about 15, 16 years, something like that. Prior to that, I worked for Metro Waste Authority, which is the largest solid waste agency in the state of Iowa. My background is in chemistry. I'm a hazmat chemist. And I did also do a stint for a couple of years as an emergency responder. I still continue to work and assist, assist our hazmat team anytime they run into something funky or with training different places, that kind of thing. And I really enjoy it. I think it's an important mix between solid waste and helping our first responders know what they're getting themselves into. I also coordinated a program called Rehab the Lab several years ago. And through that program, we were able to remove almost 600,000 pounds of hazardous chemicals that were unwanted, old, dangerous, and frankly, kind of interesting over about a 4 to 5 year period. So, and I've continued to work with schools throughout the United States. Becky, is there any way that you can just open that waiting room up and let everybody in? I'm getting beeps and alerts, and it's pretty distracting. So I wanted to just take a couple of minutes and say thank you to Vicki Davis. Vicki's on with us from the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. She's the one that applied for the grant. Vicki is awesome. I've worked with her on a number of different projects, and I love it. I just feel very fortunate that I get to work with her. Also working with Mia Rothlein from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and Mia's been instrumental also in getting the word out about this webinar. So thank you to both of you. I really appreciate it. The funding for these webinars is from USDA, and they have a little disclaimer that they wanted me to put in. So that's what's at the bottom of this screen. And then we're going to go ahead and move to the next. There we go. Just for a couple of housekeeping details today. So we will go about the whole 2 hours. The presentation's pretty long. I'm going to have to talk really fast. But if you do have any questions that come up, please go ahead and use the chat box. If it's possible for me to just give you a quick answer, I will do that. Sometimes I find it kind of hard to kind of keep where I'm at in the presentation and then also answer questions. So I will try really hard. Otherwise, if I miss any, we'll finish those up at the end of the session today. And if you have something else that comes up, or if there's something very complex, I may ask you to just contact me offline. The last slide today will have my phone number, email address, company website, all that kind of stuff. So all kinds of ways to get a hold of me. And then I do have a disclaimer below that my attorney makes me put on everything too. So basically what it says is this was created in 2024. So, and in the information and the material that I'm presenting to you is pertinent at this time. If you are watching this in 2053, it's probably a little dated. The rules probably have changed, and we probably know a lot more about what's toxic and scary out there. So please just keep in mind that this is current information for 2024. Okay, so goals for this training today are to help you understand the different experiences that I've had over the years with HHW work and what the different risks are that are out there that you may run into. Many of you, I'm sure, have lots of experience in this area. So the first thing that I'm going to do is we're going to stay high level, and I'm going to educate you or re-educate you, refresh your knowledge on how to assess risk. What are some of the resources that we have available to us? After that, we're going to go into some specific common risks that we see frequently at HHW events and permanent collection centers, and we'll talk through the risks associated with those. And then we'll end with some of the weird, crazy stuff that you do need to be aware of that is out there in the community and that you might run into. I want to make sure that you're protected from that. Crazy sideways stuff does happen at events. Yeah, I agree, Medea. Is there any way that we can turn off those pings, Becky? We're still getting.
I undid the mute or the waiting room. So I'm looking online to see how to turn it off. I do not see how
Okay.
I might have had to have done that before we started, so I apologize.
Oh, it looks like somebody put some stuff on there. Ron Cochran. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to go ahead and keep going, moving forward while we see if Becky can figure that out for us. That would be great. One of the things I also want to emphasize is there's a lot of preparation and a lot of thought processes that you should have in place prior to running one-day events, or even if you are in a permanent facility. I want to make sure that we're taking the time through the year to make sure that we've got everything in place as far as personal protective equipment, spill response, and then some tabletop or some mechanisms so that we talk through some of those what ifs. So that's what we're going to focus on at the very end today. Okay, so starting out, big picture concepts. We're going to talk about exposure routes and toxicology, give you some input on that. And then again, we're going to talk about safety data sheets. You know, a lot of this stuff might come in and it's really, really old. So if it doesn't have a safety data sheet, what are other options that you can use? I'm going to introduce you to Cameo. For those of you that have used Cameo before, I find that it is a phenomenal tool. For those of you that have not, then I would encourage you to download it on your phone. It's just a free app on the phone. Download it and play with it. And I think you'll find that it's super, super fascinating, very interesting, and really pertinent information, especially to deal with spills, because you can stack chemicals in Cameo and show what the spill impacts are going to be. And then we're going to go through, like I said at the end, we're going to go through those really odd, weird scenarios that don't happen very frequently, but they do occasionally show up. So one of the things that I found over the years in working with HHW folks is that sometimes it's easy for us to just get a little cavalier about the level of risk. The vast majority of items that you receive in are current products, which are pretty dilute most of the time. They are things like stained shellacs, oil-based paints, diluted cleaners, aerosols. So typically stuff that doesn't present us with a whole lot of risk. What we're going to talk about today are some of those unique items that do present a significant risk, and they may not come in as frequently, but they're ones that you've got to keep eagle eyes out for so that you can make sure that you're protecting yourself, your volunteers, and any of the other personnel that are working with you at the HHW event. Now, I'm going to even kind of step back from that a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about chemical exposures as a whole. So one of the things that's happened in the last 50 to 100 years is we now know we are being inundated constantly with chemical exposures. We have chemical exposures that happen to us in our job situations. We have them that happen to us in industry when we're walking through the grocery store and in our homes. Because of that, we are also seeing increases in certain types of allergies, illness, asthma, autoimmune disease, a whole slew of things that we're saying, cancers, we're seeing increases in those. I'm going to encourage you that in addition to paying attention to the chemicals that are going to come into the HHW, that because of the field that you're in, you're automatically exposed to more chemicals than the average person. Those of us that work as emergency responders, that work in the HHW field, that work in solid waste, we're around this stuff way more than just normal average people. And, you know, I want to, you know, mentally, I'd like you to compare yourself to, let's say, somebody that works as a daycare instructor or somebody that works in an insurance company. Okay, think about your exposures and then think about their exposures. You're significantly more exposed. As a result of that, you've got to make sure that you're making the best choices to minimize your exposures as you possibly can. Also, anytime you're working with volunteers or you're working with an HHW contractor, their choices, their actions on site during those events are also going to potentially impact your health. So it's important to have these dialogues up front of, contractor, do you have the education to do this? Do you have the experience to do this? Explain to me some of those things that you've run into. Prove to me that you've been trained adequately. Those are the types of things. Also, to make sure that we assess our volunteers' capabilities appropriately. So that's one of the areas that occasionally I think we expect a little too much of our volunteers, in that they just aren't equipped to address and identify and acknowledge the high level of risk that occasionally does show up at HHW events. All right, these are some of the things that we are exposed to all the time. And, you know, last statement down there, we are just now starting to understand more and more the impacts of all of these different chemicals on our health. As a result of that, my message is going to be pretty consistent with minimize exposure, minimize exposure, minimize exposure, any chance that you get. If you are, we are going to go through exposure routes, but one of the things I'd like you to encourage you to think about is if you do have volunteers or even workers that are young, younger than 20, maybe you have children that like to volunteer and pass out surveys, something like that. Family, you know, a whole family comes in and volunteers for the day. That's fine, but I want you to make absolutely certain that as you're watching your event, as you're setting things up, that you make certain that those little bodies or those young bodies are as far away from the chemicals as possible. Because young bodies are just much more dramatically impacted by chemicals. They metabolize chemical exposures differently. So we want to keep kids, anybody younger than 20, we want to keep away from those chemicals as much as we possibly can. The other thing we're going to talk about is how much we don't know about some of these chemicals. When we assess risk by them, and when we rely on our industrial hygienists and our epidemiologists to help us assess risk with chemicals, typically they are only looking one chemical at a time. Most safety data sheets, even if they're products that are mixtures, typically the toxicology data only shows up for one chemical at a time. And it doesn't take into effect, or it doesn't take into consideration the impact of synergistic combinations of chemicals. And we can't predict that a lot of times. So that's another thing, another reason why we need to just, instead of trying to assess how risky something is, really put the focus on minimizing our exposure as much as possible. There are 4 different routes of exposure to chemicals. The 2 that I predominantly focus on are inhalation and contact or absorption. And I look at contact and absorption a little different. There's difference between spilling muriatic acid on your arm. You're going to know right away you've been contact exposed to that. It's going to burn like heck, and you're going to want to get it deconned immediately. That's a little bit different than if you have, let's say, methylene chloride that spills on your arm. You might not feel it, but it absorbs directly into your skin and then starts to affect your body immediately because of its solvent characteristics and carcinogenic and toxic. You know, it's kind of an ugly mess. Because of that, we want to make sure that we're paying close attention to those chemicals that are inhalation risk, as well as contact and absorption risk. As I stated previously, there's most safety data sheets, most information that helps us to assess risk and understand different characteristics of chemicals. Those chemicals are only assessed one chemical at a time. So let's say I've got, grandma brings in a spray bottle of methyl ethyl death. And on the back, there's a really nice label that gives me all the ingredients. I can look up those individual ingredients, or I can see if I can find a safety data sheet on those. But what it's going to tell me is, well, if you're exposed to chemical 1, you've got a 200 part per million permissible exposure limit over an 8-hour time period. If you're exposed to chemical 2, well, that one's only 2 parts per million over an 8-hour time period. So it doesn't take into effect, again, the combined effects of those chemicals. So we've got to really make sure that we understand what the immediate risks are toxicologically, but then backing up above that, even higher level, we want to make sure we're continuing to minimize our exposure. OSHA's approach to this is actually pretty darn good. It's what we use in industry all the time, and it's called the hierarchy of controls. And basically OSHA says, you know what, if you find risk in something, in a process, then see if you can eliminate it. That's going to be your best opportunity. Well, at an HHW event, the whole point is to pull the risky things in from the community and dispose of them properly. We can't really eliminate that. Can't really substitute that. What we can put in place are things like engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment. Engineering controls would be like, let's say I create a lane and I have cars coming up and they pop open their trunk or they pop open the back end. And then I've got people, my workers or volunteers or the HHW contractor employees are then going over and collecting those chemicals and putting them on a cart so they can be hauled away and segregated according to chemical risk, chemical class. Well, when we initially pop open that trunk, a lot of times, especially if it's a hot day, we're going to get a face full of chemicals. You're definitely going to smell it. You might get some eye irritation if you don't have goggles on. Hopefully we'll address safety glasses later because I know you'll all have safety glasses on. When you open that trunk though, is there a possibility, instead of having those chemicals smack you right in the face, is there a possibility of having fans that maybe blow sideways across the back of the trunk so that when that trunk opens, those vapors are pushed away from your people? That would be considered an engineering control. We've engineered in something to assist us in minimizing our exposure. Administrative controls are things like we take a team of 6 people and we're going to have half of them unload from 8 to 10 in the morning. Then we're going to switch. Team 2 is going to come in. They're going to unload from 10 to 12. Then we're going to switch again. Team 1 is going to go from 12 to 2. Switch again. Team 2 from 2 to 4. By minimizing, by changing their job duties and moving them around, we're minimizing the risk to them as well. And then finally, personal protective equipment. One of the things that OSHA does really well is require industry to go through what's called a process hazard analysis. This is a way to evaluate what are the different areas of risks, what are the points where the risk is highest, and how can you mitigate that? Personal protective equipment is really your last line of defense. So anytime that we're thinking through an HHW event, I don't want you to just think about the normal everyday stuff that's coming in. I want you also to be prepared for those really weird, crazy things. So while you may have safety glasses and nitrile gloves on most of the time, but no Tyvek nuisance suit, there might be some things that come in that you want to have a Tyvek nuisance suit on, just to give you one more layer of protection between that chemical in your body. One of the other things I get a lot of questions about is, why are the consumer labels so terrible? We can pull up safety data sheets for industrial products, and it gives us all the risk and all the information that we need. We can't do that for consumer products. And what the heck? Why can we not do that? We've got a lot of them out there. The challenge here is that they're actually regulated by 2 different agencies. Industrial chemicals fall under the purview of OSHA. And OSHA says, you know what? We created a hazard communication section of code that requires industry to make information about the risks associated with their chemicals accessible to the everyday person that is working on their job and using those chemicals. Consumer products do not fall under that same jurisdictional authority. In fact, consumer products are evaluated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And what we know is that we're outpacing the Consumer Product Safety Commission because we're creating approximately 10 million new chemicals every year. And we have a staff of about 500 people that's responsible for evaluation of those chemicals before they go out to consumers. Now, we do ask that industry evaluates them themselves and issue safety data sheets sometimes. And we've got a comment that says safety data sheet accuracy has been significantly less than stellar. You are completely right on. Again, it's that they're evaluating one chemical at a time and they're not evaluating the total product. They're also not including frequently things like mutagenic data, carcinogenic data, and usually there's just a little disclaimer that says there's no data available for this. And we haven't seen much enforcement on that. It's quite disappointing, frankly. When we switch from industrial products, which at least have safety data sheets, to consumer products, which have very little guidance and requirements for alerting the public to the chemicals that they're using, it can get really frustrating. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is any of those products that come in that you are not familiar with, if there's something that comes in that's leaking, if we have an exposure, if something happens that you need information about that chemical right now, what we're going to do is we're going to first try to pull up a safety data sheet for the chemical, because hopefully if the manufacturer is making them for industry, they're accessible to you. If that's not possible, then we're going to look at the ingredients. Hopefully there will be ingredients on the container. And at that point in time, you can search by individual ingredient, the safety data sheet databases, and those will come up. And I'll talk more about this in just a minute. There is another resource I'm going to introduce you to in a couple of slides called Cameo. It's one of my favorites now. It used to be Wiser. That was my ultimate favorite, but they discontinued funding for it. So now we're relying on Cameo. Not bad, but I wanted you to understand why some products have safety data sheets, the ones that are used in industry, and other products don't have any of those requirements. And that's because they're considered consumer products governed by Consumer Product Safety Commission. The history of chemicals that we now have also is very, very extensive, or the history is very short. The number of chemicals is very extensive. And what that means is that we have a lot of stuff coming out now. We have a lot of chemicals, 10 million a year, or up to 10 million a year. That's just an estimate, that are coming out that we just don't know what the long-term history is. And just like we're finding out now with PFOA, PFAS, all of those PFAS, we're now learning more and more that these chemicals are very detrimental to human health and the environment. And we're going to, unfortunately, we're going to continue to stay in this pattern for a while. One of the things I want you to look at on this slide is how the effective dose overlaps with the toxic dose. At that effective dose at 90, overlaps the toxic dose at about 2-3%. What this graph shows us is that we really don't understand chemical interactions in the body. And there are a lot of chemicals that we're just, in my opinion, not assessing correctly. So what we want to do when we have anything like that come in, particularly if we have an exposure, we've got to dig into those chemicals and provide as much of that information to emergency responders, hospitals, and whoever has been exposed as we possibly can. So it's critical for you guys to know how to look up this information. Right, before we jump into those, the resources that I'm going to talk with you about, I want to do a little blip on the difference between marketing information and true science. Safety data sheets are supposed to be based on analytical science that has been tested by the manufacturer. A lot of marketing literature has a tendency to not fully represent the level of risk associated with those chemicals. And I want you to always think about that. Particularly if you're trying to read the label off of a consumer product, it's probably going to misrepresent, it's in a lot of cases going to misrepresent the level of risk. And I wanted to just show you an example of that. So whoops, let me go back to this slide. So what this is right here, and I've worked in industry long enough that I've actually experienced this. I was a bench chemist years ago for a company, and I had a marketing vice president do this with data that I generated, and it was really frustrating. What we have here is just a quick little study on fertilizer A and fertilizer B, okay? And so we have two sets of plants, plants A and plants B, and they are subjected either to a little bit of fertilizer A or a little bit of fertilizer B. And then what we do is we test them, we measure them for daily growth versus cumulative growth. So how much have they grown the same compared to each other? And what we end up with here is we end up with two graphs. The top graph shows plant growth by day. And what you'll notice is on day 7, something happens with fertilizer A, and that little plant that little booger just takes off. And the growth that day is significantly higher on that day than fertilizer B. Now, if you look at the graph below, that's the cumulative plant growth. And what this is this shows us that over time, those plants pretty much grew the same rate. However, if this is funded by fertilizer A, it's likely that they're going to manipulate the data just a little bit. They don't lie. But what they're going to show you is only the data on day 7. Day 7, plant fertilizer A just made that plant grow like crazy. Oh my gosh, if you don't buy fertilizer A, you are missing out. In reality, in science, in analytical evaluation, we see that those cumulative growth patterns are the same. We've seen this a lot. I've got a couple of examples of greening of labels telling you they're non-toxic, they're perfectly fine. And that's just not an accurate representation of risk. So this is my little message to really encourage you to make sure that you're looking at safety data sheets and not just the label or the marketing literature. Now, when we talk about safety data sheets, I'm going to do a quick review for you because safety data sheets are, 16 pages long, 16 different sections, and a lot of abbreviations and confusion. If this isn't something that you look at all the time every day, it can be really, really challenging to understand and make a quick decision on how risky a particular chemical is. So I'm going to give you my down and dirty. This is my fast, easy evaluation strategy for when I have to assess whether or not a chemical is high risk. And the chemical that I'm going to give you the example for is methanol. Methanol is the predominant ingredient in windshield washer solution. Is it likely that you're going to see some windshield washer solution in an HHW event? Yeah, probably. Probably going to come in. So we're going to use that as an example. So you receive a gallon, one of those gallon jugs of blue bug juice. Doesn't have a safety data sheet, but it does have the ingredients listed. And the first ingredient is methanol. And it's leaked out of the container and it's gotten on your legs, on your pants, and it's seeping through. And holy smokes, is this a problem? We've got to know right away. So what we're going to do is the best safety data sheet collection that I have found, if we're going by individual chemical ingredients, is through Sigma Aldrich. You can pull Sigma, you can type in methanol, SDS, Sigma on your phone, and it will bring up the methanol safety data sheet. We're going to first look at section 2. Section 2 is going to give us the hazards identification. It's going to give us the GHS pictograms. Please make sure you know what those pictograms stand for. Have a little cheat sheet with you if you aren't familiar with those. Have a little cheat sheet with you on the day of your cleanup event. Those pictograms will indicate immediately to you that this methanol is flammable. It's also acutely toxic, and it's also a chronic toxin. That's what those 3 pictograms mean. And then we read through all of the GHS classification statements and the hazard statements. And what we see at the top of that is that this is a flammable liquid. It's got oral toxicity category 3, inhalation toxicity category 3, dermal toxicity category 3, and a specific target organ for your eyes. So if it's splashed in eyes, it's a category 1. Now, one of the things with GHS pictograms and the global harmonization system that is frustrating is that the category numbers are the exact opposite of the NFPA numbers. So on the right, you'll see there, we've got NFPA of 4, 4, and 4. 4 in the NFPA system, National Fire Prevention Association. NFPA system, 4s are the most dangerous. When we go to the GHS system, 4s are the least dangerous. Category 1 is the most dangerous. So you're going to need to know that to pay attention to what those different risks are. And then we go down to the hazard statements. Highly flammable, toxic if swallowed, in contact with skin or if inhaled. Uh-oh, I've got it on my legs. That's bad news. That tells me immediately I need to get changed out of these clothes that have been exposed. I need to wash off that methanol, and I really need to pay attention to how I'm feeling. It's often not, windshield washer solution is often not assessed for the true risks that it has until we identify that it's made predominantly with methanol. And then we have a better understanding of, holy smokes, this stuff is a little more dangerous than we thought. Please know that the hazard statements, the precautionary statements that are shown on the slide, that's about half of them that are listed for methanol. So this is section 2. Section 2 automatically off the bat tells me I'm working with something that's dangerous. The next section that I flip to, 2 and 8, are my favorite sections of the safety data sheet. And by evaluating those, I can make a very rapid decision on just how dangerous something is. And so what I'm going to look at here, and this looks really overwhelming for someone that's not an industrial hygienist or an epidemiologist, but there's some ways that you can kind of cheat through this, okay? I'm going to give you 3 different zones, and this is super high level, okay? This is not accurate for everything. It's not an absolute, but it's a good rule of thumb that I've been able to use over the years to quickly assess risk. 3 zones. If I look down through those control parameters and I see TWA, STEL, TWA, PEL, and they are 50 parts per million or lower, that is a red zone chemical, and that is the highest level of risk of exposure damage that you can have. Anything with a parts per million of 50 or lower in any of those categories, really dangerous. If those same control parameters are between 50 and 500 parts per million, so I've got a permissible exposure limit, a PEL of 350. I've got a recommended exposure limit, an REL of 275. In this case, with methanol, I've got 200, 250 parts per million. This chemical is in the yellow zone. Yellow zone means moderate risk. I really need to pay attention to this. I need to understand how this chemical is going to try to hurt me, and I need to make sure that I've got personal protective equipment on at a minimum that will prevent any exposure to this particular chemical. And then the last zone is the green zone. And anything with a PEL or an REL of 500 parts per million or greater, still a chemical. I'm still going to respect the fact that it's not something that normally occurs in my body. It's a chemical. I'm not going to sprinkle it on my Cheerios in the morning. I'm going to have continued respect for it. I'm going to continue to minimize my exposure to it, but it's not in the red zone. I'm not going to really be concerned. Okay, so in summary, overview of windshield washer solution. According to the pictograms, it's flammable, it's acutely toxic, and it's chronic toxin. It's in the yellow zone for exposure and absorption It's got a flash point that's less than 140 degrees. So it's EPA considers this a hazardous waste. Now, this is an interesting one. We didn't talk about section 9, but in section 9, you can have what's called the UEL and the LEL readings. The LEL and UEL, and I'm going to cover this more on the next slide, give you an indication for just how flammable this chemical is. This is probably the easiest way to represent this, okay? And I know this kind of looks goofy, but it's one of the best slides I've ever seen with this. UEL, LEL is the lower explosive limit, and UEL is the upper explosive limit. If I have a concentration in the air, and we're just talking, this is an example for ammonia. If I've got a concentration in the air of 1.2%, 1.2% is my LEL. It's my lower explosive limit. 1.2% is also 12,000 parts per million. If I've got a concentration, so I get my little 4-gas monitor out, or my wonderful emergency responders pull their 4-gas meters out, and we detect a concentration of 7.1%, well, now we're at the UEL, the upper explosive limit. Anytime that we have a release with a concentration that's in between the lower and the upper explosive limit, that is the ideal, that means the ideal conditions are present for that chemical to spontaneously light on fire if it runs into an ignition source. We absolutely want to make sure that we stay either below the below the lower explosive limit, the LEL, then our concentration's too thin. Or we want to stay above the upper explosive limit, 7.1%. Well, we get up in that area, now we've got some toxicity issues. But if we're in between that zone, that's where that fish's mouth is going to bite you. That's the difference between the LEL and the UEL. Also, for any time you're working with flammable liquids, it's probably important for you to kind of understand this, because we want to make sure that we aren't hitting that lower explosive limit with concentration. Now, again, lower explosive limit for ammonia is 12,000 parts per million. That's quite a bit. And for most flammable volatile organic compounds, it's right around that 1 to 2% also. So it has to be a fairly substantial concentration for us to hit that lower explosive limit, but we need to know when we're close to it. So to sum up everything with methanol or windshield washer solution, it's highly flammable, it's very reactive, it's got a yellow flag or a yellow zone for toxicity, it's acutely toxic on some exposure routes. Now we know, holy smokes, and I'm using this all the time to wash bugs off my window. Probably not the best choice. Are there windshield washer solutions out there that don't use methanol? There are. You have to look for them though. Methanol's the cheaper version. If you get this in, and I'm guessing at big events, you're probably going to get quite a bit of windshield washer solution in. You need to make sure that you're aware that it is very, very flammable and it is toxic. Okay, so we've used the safety data sheets. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is Cameo. Cameo is an app that is available to you free of charge. It's the app that most emergency responders, our military folks, Coast Guard helped develop it, EPA helped develop. There's a whole bunch of agencies that work together to develop it. Cameo is an application that you download on your phone, and basically you can type in the name of a chemical, also sometimes the name of a product, but not always. Product names change too frequently, so you'll get your best information if you know the specific ingredient or the specific chemical you're looking for. Download Cameo, use Cameo to identify all of the different risks associated with it. There's a ton of information. There are also ways that if you happen to have someone that pulls in, and as you're pulling a box out of their trunk, two things blend together and start off-gassing, you can leave the area, pull everybody out of the area, pull up Cameo, and stack those two chemicals to show what that interaction is going to result in. piece is the information that you will glean off of Cameo is scientifically accurate and very beneficial. So if you haven't played around with that yet, I would encourage you to jump in and play around with that. And again, it's free. Okay, so far what we have covered is common exposure routes. And we've also talked about, just making sure about my time here that I'm okay on time. We've also talked about OSHA's approach to minimizing risk. You can take those same concepts and use them in your HHW events with volunteers, with your HHW collection crew. We also now understand why some chemicals are required to have safety data sheets and labels, and others are not. If they're consumer products, they're not required to have those things. So we have to do a little more sleuthing to figure out what they are. And then we talked about analytical data versus marketing data. How we absolutely have to make sure that we're sticking with the scientific data, the analytical data. Next thing we're going to talk about is personal protective equipment. A minimum, if you're working around chemicals, a minimum of what should be worn at these HHW collection events: safety glasses. I would encourage you to use chemical and crush resistant footwear. A lot of people used to call those steel-toed boots. Now they're crush resistant footwear. And then disposable chemical resistant gloves. And typically the type of gloves that we purchase are 2 mil disposable nitrile gloves. There are ones available that are 5 or 6 mil. And given the types of if you're going to be handling containers, if you're going to be helping with sorting, if you're going to be pulling things out of car trunks, I would encourage you to get the thicker nitrile disposable nitrile gloves. Again, 5 or 6 mil thick. That's going to give you a little extra protection, and they also tend to not tear as easily. So it's better protection against any exposures. If you are bulking non-hazardous chemicals or you're working with compromised containers, if you're going to be the person that gets to handle secondary containment, you're going to need to increase your personal protective equipment. I would encourage you to use protective disposable Tyvek vests or Tyvek coveralls, not vests, coveralls. I don't know where that word came from. Chemical resistant goggles, particularly if you're dealing with VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Remember, your eyes are very, very absorbent materials that they're very susceptible to chemical irritation and chemical burns. So we want to protect those. So the best way to do that is with chemical protective goggles. Also still the crush resistant, chemical resistant footwear. And then finally, it might be helpful to have a dust mask. Now, in events that I've had where we've had very enthusiastic volunteers, I've had over the years, 1 or 2 that have said, well, I'm just going to run to Menards or my local box store, and I'm going to buy myself one of those little face mask things. Those are called respirators, air purifying respirators. If they are volunteers, they can certainly do that. However, I wouldn't have my volunteers touching the chemicals that much. I think that's a high risk decision. Also, if we have any employees that want to do that because things stink, you cannot put an APR on, you cannot use air purifying respirators unless you have a full OSHA respiratory protection program. And that includes things like medical monitoring, evaluation of cartridges. There's a whole, it's an in-depth program. I would encourage you to not allow anyone to do that except for your contracted household hazardous waste collection firm. Your hazardous waste disposal company is probably APR certified. They probably have respirator protection programs. Might be a good thing for you to ask them. Next thing is spill components. And one of the things I wanted to give you some heads up about today are different spill components that you should have accessible and available to you. A lot of the stuff that comes into HHW events is the containers are compromised, or they're gooey and crusty on the outside, or they're rusted and look like they're going to fall out the bottom. So make sure that you have a lot of secondary containment in the form of poly bags. Heavy drum liners work really well for this. Also, we went through Ziploc bags or zip close bags. Those are very, very helpful for small leaking containers or small containers that need some protection and segregation from those chemicals that are around them. Non-reactive absorbent, kitty litter, clay kitty litter, not the fancy crystal kitty litter, nothing with fragrance in it, nothing that has other additives in it, just plain old cheap clay kitty litter is an excellent choice. It's inexpensive. You can use it to berm and dike around any spills that occur. And it's something I would recommend that you have quite a bit on hand. Next thing would be vermiculite. A lot of folks ask me about sand. I am not an advocate of using sand in spill kits. Number one, it doesn't absorb anything. And so then all you end up with is contaminated gooey sand. And then you still have to figure out how to get rid of it. Better to use something that's actually going to truly absorb those chemicals, the clay kitty litter or vermiculite. Both of those are good choices. Also, you want boom socks and spill pads. You want the universal absorbent ones, so don't need to focus on the acid ones or the oil ones, anything petroleum ones. Just the universal ones are just fine. You may want to consider having some neutralization absorbent. And for those, what I mean is if we have an acid spill, we may be able to use baking soda, not only to absorb it, but to also react off the acid. If we have a caustic spill, let's say somebody brings in some carpet cleaner and it's got a pH of 10 because of the benzalkonium chloride or I think it's benzalkonium chloride that's typically in those. Anyway, a lot of those carpet cleaners will have high pHs. If those spill, you can actually use citric acid. It's readily available and pretty inexpensive. Make a berm or make a dike around it and react off that decrease the pH so that it's not so strong of a caustic. Overpack drums, waste collection drums, you want to make sure that you have those on site. 5-gallon buckets with screw top lids. There's a particular brand that Amazon has in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see those where the drum or the lids seal tightly. They seal securely for DOT transport, but you can unscrew and screw in the top of the lid so you can continue to add things to your bucket. Really works out well. Extra personal protective equipment, caution tape, cones, just to keep everybody out of the way if we do have a problem. And then things like disposable dustpan and brooms. Make sure that you're cautious about static charge buildup if you buy plastic ones. I've bought them several times from one of the Dollar Tree store type things, dollar stores. And they work pretty well because you can just throw them away with the rest of the contaminated debris. You might want to have a large push broom with stiff bristles to do your final cleanup. And then if you do have broken glass, it's always nice to have just like a pair of tongs or something that keeps that sharp edge away from your nitrile gloves as you're trying to clean up. And then again, you're going to use Cameo, your safety data sheets, to evaluate best spill measures. So this is a quick little video. It was developed by Seattle. So there's going to be some phone numbers in it. There's going to be hey, contact this website to get a free spill kit. They're defunct. They no longer give away free spill kits, but the video does show some really good strategies for cleaning up spills. So let's take a look.
Meet John. He's going to help show you how to use your spill kit, just in case a spill happens at your facility. It's simple and could save you thousands of dollars in required cleanup costs. For example, this was John a year ago when he didn't have the right tools to manage a spill. He quickly learned that the spills that get into our storm drains end up in his local lakes, rivers, and streams, and that he could be fined by Tim, the otherwise friendly stormwater inspector, for not responding properly. Just look at the consequences. It's not pretty. Follow these 6 simple steps to avoid a messy spill. Number 1, plan for the spill. John went to resourceventure.org and he got a free spill kit and help developing his spill plan. So he's pretty much ready for anything. He knows that the spills that enter storm drains need to be reported to Seattle Public Utilities right away. Number 2, recognize and evaluate the spill. Evaluate the situation and select which type of spill kit would be best to clean up your spill. Be sure to put on the protective equipment found inside. Number 3, stop the discharge. First, stop it at the source to make sure it does not continue to spread. There isn't a single way to do it. All spills are different. And sometimes, it requires getting a little creative and using equipment you might already have on hand. Number 4, protect the drain. John uses the supplies in his free spill kit to block the storm drain, which keeps pollutants out of the system and gives him more time to focus on cleanup. Keeping pollutants out of the system will save John a lot of money in cleanup costs. Remember, If a spill reaches the storm drain, notify Seattle Public Utilities right away by calling 206-386-1800. Number 5. Now it's time for John to clean up the spill. Here, we see him using the booms and throwing them downstream of the spill's flow to stop its spread. He uses pads to soak up excessive liquids from reaching the storm drain. After you've saved the day, make sure to dispose of used materials appropriately. If you aren't sure how, call Resource Venture for guidance. Number 6. Evaluate and refill as necessary. Take steps to make sure the spill won't happen again. It'll save you time and money in the long run. If you need more materials, order them now so you'll be ready if a spill does happen. Crisis averted and the spill is resolved. Pretty simple, huh? Acting fast and taking action to prevent damage to the environment and your property will pretty much make you a hero. Like John here. Great job, John. For free help and answers to all of your questions, meet.
All right. So one of the things that didn't cover that I just want to mention when it comes to spills is to make sure that you stop the flow. He said it real briefly, but make sure that you stop the flow of the spill using booms, dikes, pads, whatever you need to, and then work from the outside of the spill in. It will help preserve your cleanup materials. A lot of times I've been on spill sites where folks have just grabbed a whole stack of the spill pads and just started walking around and winging them all over the place. That really doesn't work effectively. You want to start from the outside of the spill, stop the containment or stop the flow of the spill with containment, then move from there to absorbing the materials by moving from the outside in. And again, they did emphasize that to make sure that you know how to dispose of your cleanup spill materials, your contaminated spill materials properly as well. So we talked about chemical exposures, how they occur. We talked about SDSs and the quick and dirty using sections 2 and 8 in your safety data sheets to get a real fast picture of just how dangerous a chemical is. We talked about safety data sheets, Cameo. We talked about using them, safety data sheets for consumer products to also evaluate risk. And then we've just gone through PPE and spill controls. So very good. I've got down here that we're going to take a 5-minute break. I am not going to take a 5-minute break because I think that we'll probably end up with questions at the end. So that's what I'm hoping anyway. So I'm actually a little ahead of target right now. We're going to go ahead and start digging into some of the chemicals that you're going to see. And what I focused on today, because there are so many chemicals that come into cleanup events and HHW facilities, I focused on 2 types of chemicals that I've seen that I think are the highest risk over the years. Corrosives and caustics, and then also toxics, specifically toxics that are water reactive or are a lot of times unlabeled. So those are the things that we're going to start getting really down into the weeds on all of these chemicals. We're going to evaluate the common ones that we see. I'll give you some specific brand types that I've seen over the years. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge. So the guy in the photo here is Kyle Fisher. And Kyle runs the HHW Permanent Facility for Metro Waste Authority in Des Moines, Iowa. It's the biggest one in the state. They also serve another 21 or 22 counties. I can't remember how many it is now. But a whole slew of other counties they run around and collect as their local sites get filled up. Kyle shared a bunch of information and a bunch of photos with me too. He and I have worked together on and off over the past 25 years. He is an absolutely fantastic resource. And he was a member of NAMA for a really long time. So those of you that are NAMA members, if you happen to run into him, tell him, hey, good job on the photos and thanks for sharing with Becky. All right, we're going to talk about these and then we're going to end with some questions for you to think about with your contractor. Okay. So first thing that we're going to dive into are corrosive acids. Okay. And the reason that, so a lot of people will say corrosive and they mean the whole category of acids and bases. I want to focus the fact on corrosives are acids, caustics are bases. So that's the way I'm going to refer to them. Now, general characteristics of corrosive acids, typically when we see them in HHWs, they have a pH of less than 3, and we measure that using pH paper. It's really inexpensive. If you've not used pH paper before, I would encourage you to get some and then just play around with it a little bit. Test a whole bunch of stuff in your house and just know that anything with a pH of 3 or less and anything with a pH of about 10 or greater, both of those can be very harmful, can be very dangerous. Not all of them, it's not an all or none, but many of them with a pH of less than 3 or greater than 10 are going to be hazardous to your health. The risks associated with corrosive acids with pH of less than 3 is that they can compromise their exterior containers. A lot of them previously over the last 30 years have been packaged in plastic containers. And when they sit around that long, those containers become very unstable. If you do happen to pick one up and you spill that acid on the front of you or down an arm or anywhere else, it's going to hurt instantly. It does immediate tissue damage to whatever the point of contact is. And it also can cause, if you have a splash in your eyes, irreversible damage to your eye tissue. So these are things that we just don't want to mess with. Toxicological impacts, they definitely have an impact on eyes and mucous membranes. They can also cause respiratory irritation, leading to things like chemical pneumonia. Skin contact can result in either anything as mild as dermatitis all the way up to full-on deep burns that are very, very painful. And then chronic exposure to even low-level vapors can a lot of times lead to respiratory diseases such as chronic bronchitis. So these are the types of things that we want to look out for. So the class of chemicals, so these are some of the common corrosive acids that we see that come in into HHW facilities. And what I've done over the next couple of slides is I've pulled out some specific ones that I think are the most risky. Okay. We'll talk about those. And again, if you have any questions as we're going through these, please let me know. Okay. Or if you need any additional examples or anything. All right. First thing, corrosive acids. First one that I'm concerned with is muriatic acid. It's 37% hydrochloric acid, very concentrated. It's usually found as a cement cleaner, a pool chemical, a pH down for pool chemicals. Also one of the, I looked up a bunch of the marketing materials over this, and one of the containers actually says it brightens your masonry. Okay, it brightens your masonry by eating off the top layer of it. So it's really, really dangerous stuff. If you get a nose full of it, it smells like rotten eggs and pool chlorine, and it's very uncomfortable in your nose, and it'll also cause, if you breathe it too much, it will cause respiratory damage down your trachea and then into your lungs. When the containers are compromised, a lot of times we'll go to pick them up out of the back of vehicles and they will just disintegrate. So be very, very cautious when you're handling these containers. As you can see, those two photos on the right show the compromise that has happened with those particular containers. This particular chemical causes severe burns to skin, eyes, respiratory tract, and lungs. It is also extremely reactive with other chemicals. This is one of those ones that frequently shows up in the back of garbage trucks doing things like lighting foam couch pieces on fire, just because it's such a strong oxidizer and such a reactive acid. Can also off-gas chlorine gas if it's mixed incorrectly or inadvertently with something else. It can off-gas chlorine, which becomes very toxic very quickly. Personal protective measures you want, if you're going to handle this, particularly if you see that the container has become compromised. It's an older container and it's become compromised. Gauntlet style heavy nitrile gloves. We want to protect your arms as well as just your hands. Safety goggles for these because of those off-gassing vapors. Tyvek coveralls, boot covers, and then make sure that you get that into secondary containment immediately. So over the years, I've kind of developed this little scale of danger. And this one, in my opinion, is a 5 out of 5. It's very dangerous chemical. And we unfortunately do see it a lot. A lot of times we have consumers that will buy this, think they're going to clean their driveway. They get it home. They use about a half a cup of it. And they figure out immediately, holy smokes, this stuff is bad news. And it's burning the heck out of my face and hands. And then they decide to get rid of it. So just kind of be aware that it can compromise those containers. The next one is sulfuric acid. This is known as battery acid. It's also a primary ingredient in drain cleaner. A lot of times battery acid can be purchased at a number of different box stores. And then what happens is you get it home, you might fill up your lead acid batteries. And ultimately, we don't use the whole box. We don't use the whole quart of it. And so a lot of times those consumers will bring these into us to take care of them. One of the things I want you to be aware of is some of those come in cardboard boxes, and then they've got like a poly or a plastic liner that actually holds the chemical. And then they have spouts or spigots that come out the top. And those are so you can pour the chemical, the sulfuric acid, into the batteries easier without splashing it all over the place. Problem is once you cut that spout open to get the material out, there's no way to reseal it. So I've had everything from the one that always stands out in my head is we had one come in one time with a binder clip on it. And any way that a consumer tries to close that, they try to typically fold it down, bend it over, and then tape it closed or seal it closed with a clip. And a lot of times that is such a potent acid, it's such a strong acid that it eats right through those closures. So the containers can be compromised with this. They can frequently leak. Be very careful when you're picking them up. Can cause severe burns to skin and eyes, respiratory tract and lungs, just like the other acids. And again, pay attention to the spout. For personal protective measures on this one's not quite, in my opinion, as dangerous as the muriatic acid. We can visually see the impact that the spout is open on this one. With the muriatic acid, sometimes it's hard to tell that those containers have been compromised and they just pop open. So this one is a 4 on my scale of danger, but it's still right up there. And for protective measures, we want to make sure that we're using gauntlet, heavy nitrile gloves, again, the kind that protect our arms, safety goggles, Tyvek coveralls and boots, and then secondary containment. Make sure that it's available. Okay, the next one. This one's a really, really rotten one too. It's surprising that it's sold the way that it's sold, but this is hydrofluoric acid, or also ammonium or sodium bifluorides. So 2 different chemicals here, but kind of the same reaction. Both of them are fluorinated acid chemicals. One is armor etch or glass etching cream. The other is rust remover. It comes in these little brown bottles, and they're available all the way across the country, and they're pretty much used to clean coffee makers. That's one of their claims to fame. For some reason on that one, on that particular bottle, it says for all color fast fabrics. So I think that also means that you can dump it in the laundry. I'm going to tell you right now, hydrofluoric acid is one of the most wicked acids that I come across. I've been doing this for a very long time, but this particular acid is what's called a calcium scavenger. And what that means is that if you dump it on your fingers, if you dump it on your arm, if you dump it on your torso, it immediately permeates through your skin and starts to scavenge any calcium it can find. A lot of times we actually have a facility here in Iowa that makes this. And what we see a lot of times is if you dump it on and it gets onto your hands, a lot of times we lose fingers or we lose parts of fingers with exposure to this particular chemical. It is one of the worst chemicals that I see. If you are working and it happens to dump on your torso, if you dump enough of it on, it can throw you into cardiac arrest because it messes with the calcium channels in your heart and in your cardiac system. Typical decontamination methods, we're going to throw water on this to decontaminate anybody that's been exposed to it, but typical decontamination doesn't often work with this particular chemical. It is really, really rough stuff. It's extremely dangerous to eyes, hands, respiratory tract, skin, any place that you're exposed to it. This is bad news. So personal protective measures, we want those larger gloves, safety goggles, Tyvek coveralls and boots. And then again, this is another one that probably should go into secondary containment. It does have a tendency to impact the integrity of the container. So we want to control that and control any exposure by putting it in secondary containment. And this is another 5 on my scale of danger. This is another one that I do not like messing with at all. All right, next on the list is phosphoric acid, another corrosive acid, not typically as strong as the other ones that we've seen. So this is a little less risky than the hydrofluoric. It's way less risky than the hydrofluoric, and it's also less risky than the sulfuric and the hydrochloric. Other names or chemicals that it comes in, rust remover, rust dissolver, naval jelly, drain cleaner, degreaser, cement cleaner, scale remover. This is a much better, gentler acid to work with. It still has the potential to cause burns. Okay, don't misunderstand me there. It still is a very, very strong acid. However, it's not as strong or as dangerous as that hydrofluoric or hydrochloric. The containers for these are often compromised as well, so we want to make sure that we've got secondary containment around. This can cause severe burns to the skin, eyes, respiratory tract, lungs, same as the other acids. This one's unique too, that it might also cause allergic skin reactions. It is a sensitizer. It can be a sensitizer over years. It does have less odor and less danger overall, though, than the hydrofluoric and the hydrochloric. Same type of personal protective measures. We want to make sure that we have gloves, heavy-duty nitrile gloves that are longer, that cover our arms, safety goggles, Tyvek coveralls, and boots, boot covers, and then again, secondary containment. And this one's probably about a 3 on my danger scale. Okay, and then the last acid class that we're going to cover are citric acid and lactic acid. And we've had a lot of products change to these over the years. Typically, these will have more than just citric acid or lactic acid in them. They'll have a number of different chemicals present. So again, if you're unfamiliar and you have an exposure, you're going to want to look up each of those different chemicals. These are used in bathroom and household cleaners, scale removers, rust removers. A lot of these are also greenwashed. So they like to give us the indication that, oh, it's citric acid, it's no big deal, it's shoot, you might as well just sit down and pour it on your Cheerios, okay? I'm going to tell you no. A lot of these have D-limonene in them. They can become allergens. They can induce asthmatic reactions in some people. They can become skin irritants and people can end up with dermatitis. They can cause irritation to the eyes. They're also very reactive with metals, with bleach, and they can off-gas chlorine gas if they're mixed with bleach. So still require quite a bit of caution, but these are down at the danger zone probably of about 2. So much less dangerous, however, not nearly as risk-free as they'd like you to believe, okay? So please, disposable nitrile gloves should be okay for these. Safety glasses should be okay for these. They are much less dangerous, but this still doesn't mean that we want to hang around them and use them and not have personal protective equipment on. Okay, that's all I've got for acids. Do we have anybody that has any? I want to take just a second. Anybody has any questions that they want to throw in the chat about any acids or acid exposures, how to handle different acids, what to look for at different events, please. Type them into the chat if you've got any questions. Okay, we're going to go ahead and keep moving forward then. Okay, the next is caustic bases. Okay, so these are chemicals that have a pH of 9 or higher. A lot of times the acids will be liquids. The bases can be solids or liquids. It's kind of a mixture of all of them. Risks associated with these are compromised chemicals. They can cause visible destruction to skin. So you get this on your skin. And the interesting thing with caustic base exposures is that you don't necessarily feel them right away. If it's a liquid with a pH of 10, 12, something like that, and you spill it on your skin, it's going to feel very slippery. It doesn't burn and tell you right away, get this stuff off of me, the way that an acid does. Also, if you're dealing with any type of solids and something falls into a boot, something like that, it may be a long time before you know that you've even had an exposure occurring. And the reason, it's just a different chemical reaction that's occurring when you do have an exposure. But the decon is the same. The response should be the same. You want to get this off of your body. And if it's a deep enough burn, you're going to need to seek medical attention. So a lot of times we don't know as much that we're being exposed to bases. So you've got to kind of pay attention to that. And one of the other things that we see a lot is, even if you're using cleaners, a lot of people become more and more susceptible to skin, to dermatitis from exposure to these chemicals. So, you know, go back to that original message of please make sure you're minimizing your exposure. These are some of the caustic bases that we see. All right. And one of the things I want you to notice is that Clorox is included in here. Now, different hazardous waste disposal companies will handle Clorox a little differently. So make sure that you check with your hazardous waste company to determine how they want you to handle Clorox or handle sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach. Okay. Now we're going to select out just a couple of different ones of these that are most common and give you an overview of what the risks are. So common product is sodium hydroxide. It's also called lye or caustic soda. It's used in drain cleaners. It causes pretty severe burns to the skin, definitely permanent damage to the eyes. It's also very reactive with metals, oxidizers, and bleach. This is one of those ones that if you splash, if you're using liquid plumber, cleaning out the sink, right? And you splash it on your arm or your hand, you're not going to feel it right away. It's going to feel slippery. It's also going to be very hard to get that feeling off as you're washing. So make sure you're using some soap or even a little baking soda to neutralize it and remove it from your skin. Now, if you have a burn, lots and lots of water only and seek medical attention. If you can actually see the burn, you've done tissue damage, you want to make sure that you've stopped that tissue damage from continuing. Historically, these have been packed in metal containers, which is really ridiculous because they eat their way out of the metal containers and you'll end up with giant crystals, white crystals on the exterior of the container. Crystals that occur from caustic bases like lye are not explosive crystals. I know a lot of you probably have heard over the years that you've got to watch out. Any container with crystals could be bad news. And that's true. I want you to continue to have that very cautious approach. However, if you note that it's a lye, a container of lye that's old, those crystals are going to be sodium hydroxide crystals. So they're not going to be the explosive unstable type. Danger area on this, these I just don't feel are as nearly as dangerous as those acids. So this is probably presenting a moderate risk of 3. For this, you can use disposable gloves, normal sized safety glasses or goggles. And then if the exterior of the container is compromised, I would encourage you to use a secondary containment for these. Okay, the next caustic base that we want to talk about is potassium hydroxide. Also used in drain cleaners, pool cleaners, or pool pH adjusters. Oven cleaners is a that we see that come into facilities. You've got to be really, really careful with these. One of the things I want to point out to you is that we have, in the photo here, we have an acid drain cleaner, and then we have a sodium hydroxide or a caustic drain cleaner. If we mix the two of those together, we are going to get a very hot reaction. It's going to bubble, it's going to spit, it's going to off-gas some stinky smell and toxic gas. This is not anything we want to mess with. So if you are assisting like with sorting from an HHW event, you want to pay attention very, very closely to what the labels on the back of these say. And they will say either that they have an acid in them or that they have a caustic in them. A lot of times they will have sulfuric acid or sulfamic acid in them. They'll also have, sometimes the caustic ones will have sodium or potassium hydroxide. They use both. A lot of times we'll have somebody that will clean out just under their sink and they'll put everything into one box. And these two sitting next to each other is a really bad chemical reaction. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to compromised containers on these. We want to make sure that we separate them according to acids together and bases together. We want to keep them away from each other. Label reading is absolutely critical on this. And I think probably For these, unless it's an evidently an obviously leaking container, I'd encourage you to use just normal nitrile disposable gloves and safety glasses for this. The key thing with these though is you've got to make sure that you're reading the label correctly. I put these on as a 5 on the scale of danger just because the interaction between the two of these is bad news. If we're handling each of these chemicals separately, they're probably down about a 3. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that? pH paper can be your friend if these labels are unreadable. Absolutely, Brian. Thank you for that. And yes, I would encourage you to make sure you have a lot of pH paper around. You can get it off of Amazon now. It's super cheap, and it will help you definitely to identify whether you're dealing with an acid or a base. Acids are going to turn pH paper red. Bases will turn pH paper blue. And the easiest way to remember that is base and blue start with B. Okay. All right. This is a neat little video that it's another one off of Google. If you are doing any training with your people and you'd like a copy of any of these or a link to these videos, send me an email at the end and I will make sure that I get them over to you. I find this one really helps with understanding chemical reactions and which ones are dangerous. So let's go ahead and get this started.
We want to thank Google's Science Journal app for supporting PBS Digital Studios. When things start looking grimy in the bathroom and it's time to whip out those yellow gloves, the only thing that matters is getting the job done as soon as possible. So you open the cabinet, see a bunch of bottles and think, hey, this cleans and that cleans. Why not mix them all together? That'll kill the dirt and grime faster. Well, think again. Your all-purpose cleaning cocktail could turn a bad day even worse. Is death by toilet bowl cleaning a real thing? Can mixing household cleaning supplies kill you? Today, folks, you're about to find out, so pay close attention. This video may very well save your life one day. First and foremost, realize that household cleaners are safe to use when used properly. Read the label, wear your gloves, and you'll be perfectly fine. But some of these chemicals, when mixed together, undergo reactions with dangerous results. And I don't just mean pouring them in a bucket together. The most common risk of danger is when people mistakenly clean the same surface, like a toilet bowl, with 2 different cleaners at the same time. Let's take a look at some of the most typical mistakes. Bleach is a common household cleaner that's found in a host of different products. Typical household bleach is usually a solution of around 5% sodium hypochlorite in water. Sodium hypochlorite is an oxidizer that's really good at breaking down dyes and can kill microorganisms by denaturing their proteins. So aside from brightening your white laundry, bleach is also an excellent disinfectant toilet bowl cleaner. But this highly reactive molecule won't stop at dirt, germs, and colors in your clothes. It'll quickly react with other cleaners, like ammonia, which can create dangerous byproducts. This grease-killing household cleaner is usually a 5 to 10% solution of ammonium hydroxide in water, but can be found in a host of other products, from blue window sprays to typical all-purpose cleaners. When mixed with bleach, ammonium hydroxide and sodium hypochlorite will react to create a noxious gas called chloramine, which in turn can further react with the sodium hypochlorite to create other byproducts such as dichloramine and nitrogen trichloride. Exposure to this triptych of chemical vapors can irritate the eyes and cause severe respiratory issues. It may not exactly kill you, but serious exposure can certainly land you a trip to the ER. Now, if chloramine and its byproducts weren't enough to freak you out, you're going to love what happens when alcohol enters the mix. Sodium hypochlorite reacts with isopropyl alcohol to create a host of caustic chemicals, including hydrochloric acid, chloroacetone, and most importantly, chloroform. This highly vaporous chemical causes extreme irritation in your eyes and can be absorbed into your body through your skin, which can cause a lot of damage in and of itself. While it's hard to imagine why anyone would intentionally mix these two, which would be pretty dangerous in a small, poorly ventilated room, it is possible that someone might spray and scrub a surface with alcohol that was just previously cleaned by bleach. This type of exposure, even though small, can still affect you. Pro tip, the same reaction can occur with ethanol, so be extra careful when cleaning up any messes at a party. Drain cleaners are often very concentrated, which is necessary because their job can't be done with the help of a scrub brush. But the big thing here, folks, is that drain cleaners are not all made of the same stuff. There are three primary categories: oxidizers, acids, and bases. Some oxidizing drain cleaners can contain high concentrations of sodium hypochlorite, or bleach. If you were to pour an acid like hydrochloric acid down a drain that already has high concentrations of sodium hypochlorite, they'll react to make chlorine gas, a gas more commonly known for making World War I one of the worst living nightmares in human history. Not only can this stuff asphyxiate you, it can also lead to severe chemical burns inside your throat and lungs. Even if it doesn't kill you, it can still have long-lasting effects on your health. If you see a spooky-looking yellow gas coming out of your drain, you're in huge trouble. But that's not all. Many of the decloggers like sodium hydroxide cause exothermic or heat-generating reactions when they're busting up oily grime. When you mix acids and bases together, the reactions may cause scalding hot water or steaming vapor to come billowing out of the drain. Depending on the pH of your two decloggers, it isn't necessarily true that they'll have neutralized each other perfectly. So in other words, that scalding hot water might have a rough chemical edge as well. So, is death by toilet bowl cleaning really possible? In certain circumstances, yes. But for the most part, if you do end up coming in contact with these dangerous chemical byproducts, you'll more than likely just end up in the emergency room. So being wise about chemistry might just save your life one day. Thanks to Google for supporting PBS Digital Studios. Their mobile...
Okay, so death by toilet bowl, definitely something we want to avoid at our HHW events. So, and I've seen a lot of times over the years, inevitably people just throw all of this stuff under their sink that they're trying to get rid of into one box. So if you are going to be assisting or you have staff that's going to be assisting with those segregations, label reading is critical, because we just take, we misplace one acid and throw it in with the caustic, something like that. We can end up with some really big problems. So something to think about. All right, we're going to switch gears away from the corrosives now, and now we're going to talk about toxics and poisons. This is a category that is enormous. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, on broad scope, different types of toxins. I've pulled out some specifically that I've seen over the years that I think it's really important for you to be able to recognize. These are kind of the worst of the worst, in my opinion. I will be teaching another webinar July 11th from 10 to noon Eastern time. We'll have that on the last slide as well. But I'll include some additional poisons and toxins then. So this is just kind of give you an overview. Critical information to determine how toxic something is. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with a particular chemical when it comes in, again, pull that safety data sheet, pull up Cameo. One of the challenges with toxins is a lot of times the names, the chemical names can be 30, 35, 40 letters long. Not pleasant. Do the best that you can. Search as much as you can on the trade name to see if you can pull up a safety data sheet based on it. All right, so let's dive into this. So there are enormous numbers of these. We're going to focus on the ones that have the worst, most dangerous impacts if something goes sideways. So that's what we're going to work on today. Primary routes of exposure are inhalation and then absorption or contact. These can be water reactive. So to decon with water can be really challenging. So we've got to kind of think about that as we're talking through these as well. I will tell you though, exposure, if we have any exposure to any of these things, the key is going to be to decon with water, but copious amounts of water, lots and lots and lots of flushing to get those residual chemicals off of your body. These also can be carcinogenic. As I've said before, there's a very little understanding of those synergistic reactions. So we've got to pay attention to those. Toxicological impacts for these classes of chemicals: respiratory distress, respiratory failure, cancer, autoimmune illnesses, disease, death. There's a whole slew of things here. So let's dive into these a little bit. And these are some of the ones that we see. This is not an all-inclusive. And additionally, these are predominantly focused on garden chemicals, so pesticides for the most part. There are a whole slew of other toxic and poisonous chemicals out there. I am not going to focus on pesticides today. I think we all have, or if you're working in this arena and you're working in household hazardous waste, I automatically click the box that if I'm dealing with a pesticide, it's dangerous, toxic, going to try to kill me somehow. So I would encourage you to do the same thing. And again, minimize your exposure. All of these things are designed to kill plants. We're really not a whole lot different, made up of a lot of the same ingredients. So I would encourage you to make sure that you're operating very, very carefully around your pesticides. That's not necessarily what we're going to focus on. Also, I want you to keep in mind that anytime we're trying to assess toxicity or poison, it's very difficult to assess how it's going to affect a particular person individually, because there are different changes, there are different genetics that cause us to respond to these toxins differently. There are different environmental conditions, different concentrations, different body physiology. All of those things will impact how your body in particular responds to a toxin. So instead of trying to figure out just how much you can be exposed to and be okay, minimize your exposure. You don't know if you're the one person that's going to end up allergic to something or have a bad reaction to something. So again, minimize your exposure. Okay, first one that we're going to talk about, and I am dumbfounded that these are still available to normal humans, but they are. These are water reactive rodenticides. These are a lot of times used in co-ops by the rail lines to completely eliminate any rodents or other pests that are in things like grain silos or train rail cars. They are, however, available to the general public, and they are most often sold as rodenticides, mole killers, gopher killers, that type of thing. Now, there are several different types, and a lot of them look very similar. Most of the ones that have those yellow cones, like the upper right-hand picture, have strychnine in them. Okay, while strychnine is a horrible poison, it is a long-reacting poison, and it is not water reactive. The particular ones that you need to be aware of and you need to pay attention to are the ones that say the primary ingredient is either zinc phosphide or aluminum phosphide. And the reason is the way that these work is that you find your little gopher hole, you open the container and you put down a number of the peanuts or the pellets. And then you're supposed to close the container, go get a hose and poke the hose into the hole after you've put your little poison pellets in there. What happens then is the zinc phosphide or aluminum phosphide goes through a chemical reaction and begins to generate the acute inhalation toxin phosphine gas. This is also a World War II chemical warfare agent. You put these in the gopher hole, you generate the gas, and the intention is for the gas to go through the gopher hole and kill where the gopher is or the mole. Unfortunately, a lot of times people will put the hose in the hole and then they will stand over the hole waiting to see what happens. And they're immediately right in that cloud of phosphine. Very bad. We've also had a number of fatalities. In 2017, I believe it was in Texas, there was a very tragic event where a gentleman put a bunch of these under, they had a mouse problem in the home that they were living in. It was a mobile home. And so the dad, the husband, threw a bunch of these under the mobile home with the family inside the house. And then the wife said, those stink, you need to get rid of those. So he took the hose and he was washing them from underneath the home. And the phosphine overcame the family and killed a number of the members of the family. You can Google that, or if you would like, I'm happy to share that. I have a number of the newspaper stories about that or the press releases about that. And I'm happy to share those with you if they will help your folks pay attention to just how dangerous these chemicals are. So we're looking for the words aluminum or zinc phosphide. We're looking for the words water reactive. The other kicker with these is if you're working on a highly humid day or you're working out in the rain, these will still react. They don't know the difference between hose water and water from the high humidity. Once that reaction starts with a particular pellet, it does not stop until the pellet is used up. It is an uncontrolled reaction. Please make sure that you're keeping your eyes out for these. Trade names that these come under: cyanogas, Victor, mole killer, poison peanuts. And again, they come in a number of different types of chemicals. The ones that you want to look for are the zinc phosphide and the aluminum phosphide. The cyanogas is calcium cyanide, also water reactive, works the same way. The most common ones that we see here in the Midwest are the yellow tube ones. I want you to make sure that you're paying attention and looking for those. If you do get them in, please make sure that you put them in secondary containment immediately. And these are ones that should only be handled by your professional HHW crew. You're either your HHW contractor or someone that is a permanent HAZWOPER trained HHW professional. These are a 5. If I could give these a 27 on my scale of danger, I would do so. These are bad news chemicals. And a lot of times people purchase them and then they read about them and they decide, ooh, this is scary stuff. I don't want to deal with this. I was actually in a box store several years ago, and the owner of the box store had brought in cases of these. They were in cardboard yellow cones instead of plastic ones. I found them on an open shelf and I went up and asked, you know, how many of these do you have? I think he thought I was interested in purchasing them. And he said, well, I've got 6 cases and then that partial. Each case had, I think it was 8 containers in it, and each container was 1 pound. So 8 pounds times 6 cases, 48 pounds. And when I found them, when he took me back to show me where the 6 boxes were that he had in stock, they were on the top shelf in the back of his store right next to the sprinkler system. And if the sprinkler would have gone off for any reason, it would have saturated those cardboard cones and caused that phosgene reaction to take off and occur. And it was quite a bit of stuff. Would have killed a substantial number of folks. So bad deal, bad news. Make sure that you're paying attention to these. This is one of the worst ones that we see. And unfortunately, it's out there and it shows up quite a bit. I would say that the HHW facility in Des Moines probably gets this 4 to 6 times per year easily. And it is the aluminum phosphide or zinc phosphide. The calcium cyanide, the cyanogas, we don't see nearly as much. But the Victor mole killers, we definitely see. If anybody has any questions on that or you'd like additional information on it, let me know. Okay, next one. Okay, these are products that have pentachlorophenol in them. These are all older products. Right now, EPA has listed this as a licensure only use pesticide. You have to be a licensed professional to use it. It's not in standard products any longer. However, up until, I don't know, I would guess about 1987, 1990-ish, somewhere around in there, we continue to put pentachlorophenol in a lot of different things. It is vegetative killer. It's also listed. It's a moldicide and a fungicide. So it's also included in wood preservatives. The kicker with this is it's an organochlorine pesticide. A lot of times it will come in and there will be excess on the outside of these containers. Please make sure that you do not get this on your hands. One of the things with organochlorine pesticides is they like to permeate right into your body and they don't leave and they cause a lot of damage. They're extreme toxins from an inhalation and ingestion hazard. Exposure at a high level, if you dump some on yourself, can result in neurological, blood and liver impacts. It's a probable human carcinogen. And again, whoops, I have a wrong line in there. That once the reaction starts, it's uncontrolled. I apologize. That line shouldn't be in there. There's no reaction with the pentas. Pentachlorophenol, though, it's a carcinogen, and it's also a severe environmental toxin, and it's one of those ones that we know has a lot of biomagnification concerns with it. So we've got to be very, very careful with this and minimize or eliminate. I would say eliminate any exposure to this whatsoever. Please make sure, again, if you find any of this stuff or you see pentachlorophenol on any of the ingredients list, that you let your professional HHW person know. These should only be handled with nitrile gloves, safety glasses on, and on these, I would probably say safety goggles, just because your eyes are so pervious. Okay, next one. These are unusual, but these are kind of, these are one of my favorites. These are kind of cool. Okay, these are called fire grenades. And I would suspect that probably out where most of the folks here are from the East Coast and in the Northeast, and I would suspect that there are probably a whole bunch of these laying around out there. What these are is they are filled glass globes, and they're filled with carbon tetrachloride. Carbon tetrachloride is a wicked bad solvent. Secondary containment on pentachlorophenol. If that container is compromised, yeah, I would say yes. A lot of times there'll be residual on the outside, and you just don't want people bumping up against that. So a question we had was, should we put secondary containment, use that for chlorophenol, pentachlorophenol? Yes, yeah, I would put that in secondary containment. Plus, if something fell, if the container was rusty enough that the bottom fell out, you'd have a heck of a cleanup mess on your hands. So secondary containment's a good option. All right, on these fire grenades, if they come into you, what they're going to look like is a clear glass bulb with liquid in it. There's usually no writing, no indication of what it is. They're sealed shut, so you can't sample them without breaking them open. But I want you to recognize those as carbon tetrachloride. Now, a couple of things. These bulbs are very old, so they're going to be very, very fragile. Okay, age does not do nice things to glass. It can become very, very fragile. If you do drop and break one of these, you want to make absolutely certain that you get deconned with water as quickly as possible. And then you've got to make sure that you're paying attention to see if you have any symptoms. That would almost, I would suggest if you do have an exposure, one of these, that you visit one of your medical professionals, talk through with them what happened, and see if there's any treatment that they want to do. These are very toxic. They can have long-term impacts on kidney and liver. They're likely human carcinogens as well. And again, they're not labeled, so it's really hard to figure out what the heck these things are if you receive any of them in. This is another one that we want to put in secondary containment immediately. I missed that line on there. I apologize for that. And we want to make sure that we've only got our professionals handling those. All right. Any questions on those? They are cool looking old things. As a former firefighter, I think they're neat. I kind of wanted to collect them at one point in time. And then I thought, well, that's really stupid. Why would I want this stuff in my house? Bad deal. Okay, this is a really interesting one. I'm just going to talk about this. So we are still seeing DDT, chlordane, dieldrin, and endrin. These are toxic pesticides that have not been allowed for use for decades, and yet we still we still receive these in frequently. Sarah says, I believe they use this chemical for a cleaner. Yeah, carbon tetrachloride it was also a dry cleaning agent. So you'd go and you'd put it on your clothes and it would eat everything bad off. And then you'd put the carcinogen still in your clothes on your body. Not a great choice. It's a good thing we've learned over the years. So we're still, boy, do we have a lot of learning to do. So good call, Sarah. Thank you for that information. Okay. The next several slides are the unusual and the dangerous things. These are very unusual. These are things that I've run into one or two times, but I wanted you to see them. I wanted you to see photos of them, and I want you to understand what the risks are. Key message again, minimize your exposure wherever you can. We did not discuss any flammables or oxidizers. That's another huge class of chemicals. I might throw some of those into the next webinar. The next webinar is going to be focused on lithium ion batteries because they're driving us all crazy across the country with how dangerous they are and catching themselves on fire. We're also going to talk about vaping products and how best to handle those because, again, we're seeing a lot of those as well. We just spent time talking about poisons and toxins and corrosives. The key message here, though, is you're going to see such a variety of HHW come in. It's really challenging. I think you just have to build years of experience in identifying all the weird stuff. If you come across something that you don't know what it is, or if that little voice in the back of your head says, ooh, this looks creepy, ask for help. That's a phone a friend moment. Please make sure that you have some resources identified that you can reach out to if you are not aware of what the risk is of the chemical that you're dealing with. Okay, we're gonna switch over to the, I'm sorry, go ahead. Can the carbon, oh, I see a question here, says, can the carbon tetrachloride extinguishers be put into secondary containment as a group, or do they need to be in individual containers? Oh, that's an excellent, excellent question. I want to tell you to put them in individual containers just because they're so fragile, but I know that's going to take a sting. I wouldn't put them in with anything else. If you end up getting 10 or 12 of them and they come in like in a metal box, like what the picture showed, I would leave them in the metal box and take the whole metal box and put it in a big, heavy poly bag. I will tell you, if one of those breaks, it's pretty much going to run right through the poly bag. So in those cases, a 55-gallon metal drum, a poly drum, or a 5-gallon bucket is going to give you the best protection. It kind of depends on the individual situation. If it's possible for you to put them individually in containers, I would do that. I would also work with your HHW contractor to see how they want them, how they may come in and then put them all into one DOT shippable box. Okay, good question. Keywords to listen to during HHW events. And these are the things that as you are bringing cars in and you're having a dialogue with those personnel, or I don't know if, you know, most HHWs will ask them to fill out a little paperwork and then stay in the car. If you hear, this is from an estate, it was from an uncle that I didn't really know, I'm cleaning it up. If you hear somebody worked at the university and did research in science or ag or chemistry, if you hear large military collection, my uncle was a vet and he had a huge collection of military stuff. Or you hear, you know, we're closing down, we just bought a property, we found an old barn full of stuff, or somebody has owned a pharmacy previously. All of those different comments should be red flags to you. And those are individuals that you may want to even pull out of the line and work with them independently so that you move them away and segregate any risk that they may have. Ask how much they brought in, ask if it's identified. One of the biggest challenges that I get anytime I do HHW question is what do I do with unknown? What do I do with something that comes in with no label? And on that one, you're going to have to work with your HHW contractor. They can typically do a little 5-finger analysis on site, but not always. So that's one of those questions you need to ask up front. All right, we're going to get through the next, I'm going to have to start talking really quick here. But these are things that I want you to be aware of. Okay, if you see old containers that are paper with hats on them that are made of paper, these containers have not been used by the manufacturers since about the 1930s. So this is a 100-year-old chemical. If it says peroxide in it, for example, this one's benzoyl peroxide. Peroxide should indicate peroxide in an old container should shoot off red flags in your head and indicate to you that, holy smokes, this is a reactive chemical that can spontaneously explode based on friction, heat, photosensitivity, movement. So this is one where you've got to get your emergency response backup in to take a look at it. Okay. If you have a container, if you have containers that come in and there are solid chunks under liquid, anytime we have solid chunks under liquid, what that means is that we're trying to keep those solid chunks from reacting to something, either air or water. Solid chunks under liquid should give you big concerns, and you should also implement your emergency response evaluation steps if you see those, unless they're pickles. Okay, solids under liquid, pickles are fine. Any other solids under liquid, no. Got to make sure that we're paying attention to that. Acute toxins, we'll occasionally see these in. Mercury, any mercury containing materials, particularly if you see what are called mercury fulminates. Mercury fulminates are extremely shock sensitive chemicals. We don't see them very often at all. One of the things to keep in mind when I say shock sensitive chemicals is that you've already had somebody pick those up, put them in a vehicle, bounce them over the road to get to you. So if we've made it that far, hopefully segregating those off and letting your hazardous waste contractor deal with them is still going to be a minimized level of risk to you. I can't say it's going to be safe. It's probably not going to be safe. But if we've moved it that many times and nothing has happened, it is likely that you'll be able to work with your hazardous waste contractor, move it one more time and get it out of there. Key thing is, you know, a lot of folks will ask me, well, why don't you just send them home with it? Well, that's the whole point. We got to get it out of their houses. We want this stuff out of the community. If we have unlabeled things and they have stuff growing out of them, again, those are things that we see quite frequently. Bring in your hazardous waste contractor and have them assist you with that. These are some of the words that we see, some of the chemical types that can become very, very unstable over the years. You need to watch out for chemicals that have these words on them. Ethers, cyclohexene, dinitrophenol. Those are usually teeny tiny little bottles, but they get really scary really quickly. Tetrahydrofuran or THF. Potassium, that'd be those chunks under liquid. Colloidin, those are typically, colloidin is from pharmacies. And when it dries down to where it looks like a clear hockey puck in the bottom of a container, that's when it's most dangerous. Nitrocellulose, we actually see some nitrocellulose chunks every now and again, not very often. They do come in. Methyl methacrylate, this is the same ingredient that people glue false fingernails on with, methyl methacrylate. Very, very toxic chemical, also forms peroxides and can become unstable if it sits around for a while. Styrene, acrylonitrile, acrylic acid, sodamide, dioxanes, 2-butanol, there's a whole bunch of others. If you are concerned that you may receive some of these things in, one of the things you can do is go out and Google peroxide forming chemicals. And there are slews of information, typically from universities, that will give you a list of peroxide formers, and they'll tell you whether they readily form peroxides or it takes a lot to get them to form peroxides. When I talk about peroxides, I'm not talking about the hydrogen peroxide that you have at home that's a 3% solution in your bathroom. I'm talking about organic peroxides that when they're exposed to oxygen degrade to the point that they generate little crystals. You can't see that the crystals are there, like old ether cans. They become extremely, extremely shock sensitive. The bottom right picture with the circle on it, those two rusty cans, those are both ether cans that had formed peroxides. A lot of times those peroxide crystals will form up under the cap. You go to open it to see if there's anything in there, and that's when they decide to get angry and detonate. If we come across anything that is on this list or on a peroxide forming list, you need to work with your HHW company. And this is one that you might need to call in some help for. These are some more examples of some of those chemicals that can become very unstable and dangerous. On the top left corner, that's a container that's already spontaneously exploded because it degraded to the point that it became shock sensitive, friction sensitive, and photosensitive. In the middle photo, if you see any containers like that with the little, that's actually a little blob of lead in the top of them. Those containers were designed so that they could hold ether, ethyl ether, and not form peroxides. Well, what we found after 50 years is they still form peroxides. Good question, Suzanne. Nitrocellulose in photography. In photography, also in science classrooms, sometimes people use it, old film. If you have like a library that's cleaning stuff out and they want to bring stuff into you, nitrocellulose can also come from old, very, very old film. So you have to be careful about that, okay? But yeah, photography also used in photography, and it's a solid, it's the solid form of the nitrocellulose, concentrated 100% nitrocellulose solid that is the problem. Picric acid, we occasionally see picric acid. It's another one that when it's dry, it's extremely shock sensitive and dangerous. There's more chunks under liquid on the left. That's actually metallic potassium, or no, that one's metallic sodium, sorry. metallic sodium, which is a water reactive. And then in the middle is a container of phosphorus that's in a beaker. It's already eaten its way out of the container. Very, very dangerous. Actually, I think it's phosphorus pentoxide. If it was phosphorus, the container would be gone. It would have exploded and burned up. Okay. I've only had this come in a couple of times at HHW facilities, and it's usually orange Fiesta ware, real or old orange Fiesta ware. Somebody will inherit a bunch of it and they won't know what to do with it. That Fiesta ware was made with uranium paint, so it is radioactive. Oh, the things that we do. How crazy is that? If someone brings that into you, make sure that you segregate it, hold it off to the side, and then work with your hazardous waste contractor to try to figure out how you're going to get rid of it. Again, the most common thing we see is that old uranium glass, either Fiesta ware. There was some glass that was produced by Fenton that also had some uranium in it. Any of those types, if they happen to come into you, do acknowledge the fact that they're radioactive. So you'll want to put a barrier between yourself and that material. Just even putting them in a cardboard box is good enough. You don't have to have a lead line container. That would be ideal, but not a lot of us carry those around. But a container to keep that away from your body would be ideal. Okay, next one. These are DEA controlled substances. We don't see these a whole lot, and these are from before there even was a DEA. A lot of times these will come in from biology, complex biology departments, biology in schools. Occasionally we'll have a pharmacy that cleans things out and closes down. Sometimes we've seen them out of estates where people just had them at home and they didn't know what to do with them. So all of these need to be managed. You need to reach out to your DEA folks to find out, or work with your hazardous waste contractor to find out the best way to dispose of them. Okay, all of these are unusual and dangerous and creepy, and we can't identify what they are. So if we have anything that's received in from a garage or from an old house or from wherever, these are ones that you need to segregate off to the side. This would fall into that unknowns category where we segregate them off to the side and we ask our hazardous waste company to identify them and dispose of them. Anytime we see crystals on the exterior of containers, we want to make sure that we're being really careful, unless it's lye or sodium hydroxide. Okay, those crystals are not going to impact you. But I want you to pay particular attention to the crystals on the left. That's from an old science lab, and those are arsenic trichloride crystals. The permissible exposure limit to that acute toxin is 0.01 parts per million over an 8-hour day. Those were really fluffy crystals, very dangerous. And so what we did, anytime you see anything like that, this is one of the tricks that I've learned is you can use a zip closed bag, open it up, slide it over the top, squeeze it in, and then take that container and put it into a bucket or another zip closed bag, but you're gonna have to work as a team. And this is another one. If you see anything like this, you should work with your contractor. Your contractor needs to advise you on how to handle those things. All right, any questions? We're getting close to the end, folks. We're going to step back just a few minutes at the very end here and talk about why we even focus on all this stuff. Why do we prepare ahead of time with spill kits? Why do we prepare with training? Why do we prepare with personal protective equipment and understanding safety data sheets and using Cameo? One of the things that we've found over the years, and if you study the science of safety, you know that the more often you address these things and you think about them, the more often you can interrupt the cascade of events that leads up to dangerous either injuries, accidents, or fatalities. As you're working to keep each other safe, I really want you to make sure that you're taking a team focus. So you, your volunteers, anybody else that's with them, the people in the cars, and your hazardous waste contractor all need to focus on operating as safely as possible, and again, on minimizing that exposure as much as possible. And the reason that we do that is because we want to make sure that everybody is going home safe. So even if you think you're doing things safe enough, particularly as we're in this season where we're going to see a lot of HHW coming in, make sure, go through your plans, go through your training, and make absolutely certain there isn't just one more thing that you can do to elevate the safety level just a little bit more. We want to make sure that we're being proactive on all this stuff. And we want to make sure that we're not only watching ourselves, but that we're paying attention to what's going on around us. Safety stuff matters 24/7. It's something we need to think about all the time. And likely you do. But it needs to be at home, at work, on vacation. All of those different places need to have a strong safety focus. And the reason for that is because injuries are just so detrimental to us anymore. If you're injured, it not only means you can't do your job, it means that you can't drive kids to the baseball practice, go sit at a softball game, take the kids swimming, pick up groceries, cook dinner. There's all kinds of ramifications. So we have absolutely got to focus on making sure that we're doing things as safely as possible and that those around us are too. Remember, the actions of your contractors, the actions of your volunteers, when we're dealing with chemicals that have inhalation risk in particular, their actions can directly affect you. And if you're impacted, not only are you impacted, but your family, your teammates, your organization, all of those impacts can be felt. To make sure that we're going to have a good, safe day, we got to prepare. We got to make sure that we have written plans for emergency response, for spill management, and we want to make sure that we go through those plans and that we've addressed everything as much as we possibly can. One of the things that we learn and that we've learned more and more through the science of safety over studies with the military and over studies in industry is that anytime we have a significant accident, typically there have been many little small things that have led up to that. If we can circumvent any of those small activities by creating a safer environment or safer practices, then we never get to the top. It's kind of like, are you filling the funnel with good stuff or are you filling the funnel with dangerous stuff? The more you fill the funnel with dangerous stuff, the more likely it is something bad's going to come off the bottom. Questions for your hazardous waste contractors. Make sure as you're selecting who to spend time with at these HHW events or that are coming to your permanent facilities, are they well trained? Have you seen a copy of their training program? Ask for it. Do they have records that they've had their people trained? Evaluate their history of citations or violations, both not just at the federal company level, but also for that local branch. Ask them if they have emergency plans and have they practiced them. What are they going to do if they're in an event and a car runs into their truck and breaks open 2 or 3 poly drums? Do they have the means to address that? Are they well equipped? Do they have spill kits? Have them show you what's in their spill kits. Make sure they have a mercury spill cleanup kit. I was on a contractor site at one point several years ago. Contractor dropped a thermometer, mercury went everywhere. I said, huh, you have a cleanup kit? I don't have my mercury cleanup kit with me. So I had to go out and get one out of my stock. Make sure that you have those and that they're prepared with those. Do they have a fire extinguisher? Has it been taken out of the truck so it's readily accessible? If they are bulking things, especially flammables, if they choose to bulk flammables on site, gas oil mixes, gasoline, any of that, have they worked with local emergency responders so that they know if something goes wrong and they call 911, is it going to be a 5-minute response or is it going to be a 30-minute response? The worst time to figure out that your HHW team is inadequate is during a spill, when there's a high hazard chemical that's come in, when somebody gets hurt, or when an emergency occurs. All right, next time we're going to talk about lithium batteries and vaping. The next webinar is July 11th. from 10 to noon. If you have any questions, comments, concerns before them, if there's something that you'd like me in particular to touch on, please feel free to email me. These are some things you can do to improve today. Have a quick discussion with your team and ask them what if questions. An emergency response, we usually call those tabletops. Evaluate your personal protective equipment and spill management equipment. Print out a list of resources, peroxidizable chemicals, a list of community emergency contacts, and then reach out with any questions that you have. Please make sure that you're minimizing your exposure. Here's my contact information. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. I truly appreciate it. Let me know if there's any questions.